during the course of my writing career, I kept remembering what Matheson said about not necessarily sticking to one thing. So I tried all sorts of stuff. Once, when I was recovering from injuries sustained on the job as a bodyguard, I was laying in casts with splints and stuff. I decided that I like sarcasm, but I don't like mean sarcasm, I just like sarcasm. And a friend had given me a copy of the Writer's Market, and in it they listed greeting card markets. I'm like, well, I like giving sarcastic greeting cards, let me try that. So I pitched to Shoebox, and they were starting a new line of greeting cards called the Maxine line with this little cranky old lady. I wrote the first 12 of those cards. So clearly I didn't need to be a cranky little old lady to write in that voice. Sarcasm is evergreen. But I tried that, and I tried it because it was something that I hadn't done that looked like I could have fun with it. I had another gig I did where I was reading in the papers, I was looking for a job actually, and I saw a job for copywriter. I'm like, well, I can do that, I think. I had to look up what copywriting was because I wasn't sure what it was. I created fake copy, and I went to apply for the job. There's a company called Burpee that makes seeds. Now, understand, I grew up in inner city Philadelphia. I didn't see anything green and growing until I was probably in my 20s. You know, it was concrete. But, you know, writing is writing, I thought. So I went to apply for the job, and they liked the fake copy I made. I created fake copy for a product. So I wound up getting this gig where I had to write the instructions on packs of seeds. So, which is, you know, it's all about writing science fiction for me. And I said to the guy, well, exactly what kind of thing would you like for this? And he said, oh, you know, basically you want to tell someone to poke a hole in the ground, drop in a seed, cover it lightly with dirt and add water. And I'm thinking, okay. So he went away, and I had an office for a week and a typewriter. Yes, typewriter, not computer. So I wrote, poke a hole in the ground, drop in a seed, cover it lightly with dirt, add water. Almost exactly what he said. And when I gave him the sheet, he said, this is great. I actually thought I was being punked at the time because what happened is because I was a writer, they assumed that my verbiage was better than their verbiage, which is, by the way, proof of insanity, just saying. But I wound up getting the gig. I got $5,000 to sit in office for a week and do that on 12 different packages of seeds. And by the way, not a lot of difference in the way you plant a seed. Turns out tomatoes, cucumbers, pretty similar. So that took me about 40 minutes. I spent the rest of the time writing an article for Black Belt Magazine, you know. But I would never have gotten that gig. Now, this is 1980. $5,000 is a lot of money in 1980. It's actually a pretty good amount of money now, but for somebody working on, you know, I was doing a part-time job at the time, that was good money, but I would never have gotten it, never gotten near it if I hadn't tried not only something different, but something I thought I might have fun at. You know, if nothing else, I thought I would have fun at the interview. You know, I didn't even care if I didn't get the job at the time because I thought it'd just be fun to go and do an interview for something I knew nothing about. Got the gig, you know. So if you don't try, you don't get. You know, and that was the thing Matheson was saying. You know, try, go outside your box. So over the years, I've written plays, I've written nonfiction books, how-to manuals, all sorts of stuff, and then just for the heck of it, in late 2002, almost 2003, I thought I might try my hand at novels. Now, I take credit for that, but really it's my wife's idea. Here's how it worked. I had written a nonfiction book under a pen name called The Vampire Slayer's Field Guide to the Undead. And the reason it was under a pen name, because I had written a whole bunch of martial arts books, and I had one book left on contract, and my editor hadn't specified martial arts book in the contract, so I did a book on the folklore of vampires and werewolves. And when I gave it to him, his reaction was, and that went on for like 10 minutes, you know. And I said, look, the book's written, I really want to do this. So he said, the only way I'm going to publish it is under a pen name because, you know, I was a pretty well-known martial arts guy at the time, and he was afraid that my martial arts readers would think I would have had, you know, just recently had some sort of cerebral accident. Turns out the book, which came out under the name of Shane MacDougall, Shane being Scottish for John, MacDougall's one of the Scottish clans my family's associated with, that book outsold my martial arts books 30-1. And also got me interested, you know, in horror fiction again, which I had drifted from for a while. And I was looking for horror novels that had a folkloric base. I only actually found a few. There are a few writers who used, and this is early 2000s, who used folklore as a basis for horror, because everybody else was more or less retreading the Hollywood versions of vampires, werewolves, and so on, which don't bear a relationship, by the way, at all to the folkloric monsters. Like the whole thing about sunlight and crosses, none of that's in folklore. The crosses came in because Bram Stoker was Irish Catholic, and he decided to put that in there. Sunlight came into the vampire myth because of the movie Nosferatu, the original silent film. Most of the crew had walked out, most of the cast had walked out because they were under budget and over time. So they needed to get the movie in the can, and they couldn't film the expensive ending. So the lighting guy, who was one of the first few people who hadn't left, said, look, we shot the vampire in darkness. Why don't we make it that he can abide the light? And the director's like, sure, fine, whatever, let's do it. And since then, sunlight. So I wanted to find stuff that tapped into the folklore. And my wife, after complaining to my wife about it for a couple of years, she said, well, just write the damn thing. So I wrote the damn thing. And I had never taken a class in creative fiction, creative writing, only in nonfiction, so I had to study the form. So I actually bought a bunch of my favorite horror novels, read them as a reader, loving them again, and then reread them multiple times as a writer, deconstructing the craft of them, to look for the elements of craft that I was learning about by reading things like Writer's Digest magazine. So I looked for point of view and pace and tone, and looked for figurative and descriptive language and the three-act structure and all the other elements of craft. I deconstructed them to find out. And then I sat down to write my own novel, not to copy any of those books, but to write them with some degree of competence, because I wanted to write something that I would be proud of, something that, as Matheson said, I would go out of my way to read. I had no expectations of it selling, but I tried. So I wrote the book, kind of liked how it came out, realized that it was the first book of a potential trilogy, went out and found an agent. And it took a little while. By this time, I had been copying that query letter I got from Black Belt and had tweaked it and so on. So I used that, a variation on that, to approach agents in New York. And got a really good agent, and she was able to sell it pretty quickly. And it was bought by Pinnacle Books, a division of Kensington, and came out as Ghost Road Blues. My first novel came out in 2006. Now, I thought the deal was for that, and it's 2 sequels, and they were paperback originals, and I thought, yeah, it was going to be it. I did my novel take and check that off my bucket list and go back to other stuff. But the book sold really well, and it was nominated for the Bram Stoker Award in 2 categories, in Best First Novel and Novel of the Year. I didn't win Novel of the Year, which was won by some guy named Stephen King. And if you're going to lose to Stephen King, because there's no shame in that. But I did win for Best First Novel, and it surprised me completely, because I wrote it just to try and also to stretch as a writer. And I wrote it for fun because I wanted to write the book I would read. And it wound up launching my fiction career.